What I wanted to share today was, I think as the years go on, my increasing gratitude for having met not just the Buddha Dharma, but the Buddha Dharma in this particular tradition. And as Venerable tells people when they come here, she says our main focus of practice, what we integrate on the cushion, what we study, is the Lamrim and the Lojong teachings. So being kind of a history buff and a biography buff, I wanted to share a little bit about how these remarkable teachings came to Tibet and how I've felt inspired by them, and they've really profoundly affected my mind, both the Lamrim and the Lojong teachings. So I wanted to share a little bit about the history of them and their practical application. There's a lovely book in our resident library here at the Abbey. It's called The Wisdom of the Kadam Masters by Thupten Jinpa, that has a little bit of an introduction on who they are, which I'll share today, and then also some of the sayings of the great Kadampa masters of Tibet. So Kadampa is a word that describes a wide range of disciples and practitioners in Tibetan Buddhism who share a very particular reverence for Atisha and Kadampa. And Atisha was an Indian master who came to Tibet in 1045. He came with the request from one of the Tibetan kings for 3 years, and due to some incredible karmic circumstances, he ended up spending 13 years and dying in Tibet. And the thing that's so remarkable about him is that he is revered in Tibet for being able to distill the entire body of the Buddha's teachings into a gradual path specific for a single spiritual practitioner, and that he broke it down in relevance according to different scopes on capacity of the practitioner. And that it helped the Tibetans to sort of put the Dharma in context in their lives, to be able to integrate it into their lives, into their meditation practices in a really gradual way. So just for me to wrap my mind around this Indian sage who came to Tibet on the request of a Tibetan king in some province, Nagari, and that he took all the Buddhist teaching and he laid it out in this very practical, step-by-step way in which one person could take the entire Buddhist path and just practice it. The other work that evolved from Atisha are these great, profound Lojong teachings. And the one that he is most well known for is called the Bodhisattva's Jewel Garland, which I have a few little samples of it. And the focus on the mind training teachings is cultivating bodhicitta, especially in the tradition of Shantideva's equalizing, exchanging self and others. And unlike the gradual path, which has got the analytical meditations on how to contemplate the Buddha's teachings with these open-ended questions, with these contemplations on different topics, the mind trainings are these very short, pithy sayings that have a very, very direct approach to dealing with the obstacles that happen when we're trying to garner this awakening mind. So in the book here, Thupten Jinpa goes through some of just kind of lays out the practical topics of some of the great Kadampa masters' pithy sayings. And it sounds like it's the psychology for the mind. The balance between individual cultivation and compassionate action in the world is one of the topics of the Lojong trainings. Balance and dynamic relationship among study, critical reflection, and meditation. The relationship between wisdom and compassion. The cultivation of greater self-awareness, especially in relationship to our own thoughts and emotions. The principles of non-attachment and non-grasping, the contemplations of death and impermanence, the practice of self-discipline, the way to bring the teachings of selflessness into actual lived experience, the way to integrate our outlook with contemplative practice and action in the world, a triad referred to as view, meditation, and action, and a contemplative practice aimed at developing the four measurable thoughts of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So they're saying that these pithy sayings, in some form or another, encompass these themes in them. So when I think about our psychological paradigms and what we're trying to do as far as our minds go, even though these are 1,000-year-old teachings, they're just so relevant to our lives today. Which I mean, that's the part that's remarkably striking for me as far as these teachings. So then in the book, Chimta Jimpo says, well, where did that word come from? Where did Kadampa masters come from? How did they come up with that? Because these are the disciples of Dron Tompa who came up with this term for themselves. They describe themselves as composed of two words, ka, which refers to sacred word or speech, and dam, which refers to either advice or instructions, or the verb to bind or to choose. So there's lots of interpretations of how you could take those two words and then describe it a little bit more specifically as a definition. One of them is because Atisha's disciples accorded great authority to his words, so much that they found them to be sacred binding practices. That's one of the interpretations of Kadampa. The other one refers to those for whom the essence of the entire Buddhist scripture is integrated within the three scopes, and for whom all the scriptures of the Buddha appear as personal instruction. So then what Jimpa says, so the Kadampa masters, it came almost like it was a school. They had their own monasteries after Atisha and Dron Tompa. Then there was Chekawa, Potawa. The three great, they were called the great Dharma brothers. Potawa, Chekawa, and Puchungwa were disciples of Dron Tompa. And then it went till the 1600s. So it lasted from about 1045 when Atisha came to Tibet all the way up to the 16th century. And then it sort of faded out. And so what Jimpa says that there's a lot of research to need to confirm why it simply sort of stopped being an effective or a distinct school in Tibetan Buddhism. He says it's partly due to the tremendous success of the custodians, so all of the Kadampa masters of Atisha and Dron Tompa, how they were able to, it spread quite a bit in Tibet to where all the four schools had some aspect of the Kadampa teachings within them. And particularly because of Tsongkhapa and the Gelug school. They were actually known as the New Kadampas. So it was so inclusive, it was so practical, it was so integrative that the four schools in Tibetan Buddhism didn't have a problem integrating them. So by the 16th century, it was so interwoven within those lineages that it kind of faded away as a specific school and then just became part of the Kagyu school, the Sakya school, the Galupa, and the Nyingma. And so I just wanted to, so what Thupten Jinpa says here is that the Tibetan people during this time, and it's so beautifully said, is that it nourished the Tibetan people by moistening the heart of bodhicitta, helped them to educate the mind so that they could see the world in a wiser, more enlightened manner, and has really guided them to be continually moved by aspirations for the highest human perfection, Buddhahood, for the benefit of all beings. So he said that the Lojong and the Lamrim teachings really invigorated and inspired the Tibetan people, that it's a true Dharma treasure unique to Tibet. No other Buddhist tradition has specifically these mind trainings, and the Lamrim laid out so specifically like this. And that now the larger world community gets to share in these precious teachings, and that our teacher received them, and just the whole lineage continues. That even though they are 1,000 years old, the insights and the wisdom of them resonate across time, across culture, and across language. So when I think about my karma, or all of our karma, we met the Buddha Dharma, but we met it specifically in this tradition, and for whatever reason, it's resonating with us on a very, very deep level. It's literally mind training, how to turn our minds when the afflictions arise, when we've got things seen in a very particular, incorrect way, by these pithy verses, whether it be the 37 practices of Bodhisattva, 8 verses of thought transformation, the 7 thought training points. They all kind of do this. This is how we can look at this differently. So it's a psychotherapy. It's a mind training. So I've learned to really appreciate the longer that I'm here, the longer that I practice, the longer that I see that this works, that this precious treasure of Tibet is really quite remarkable, and that I have a growing gratitude for having met this particular form of teachings. And I wanted to just share that Atisha's beautiful Bodhisattva's garland of gems once again, they're going to sound familiar. All of these Kadampa masters, when they laid out these verses, they're all about specific Lamrim practices and specific ways in which the mind can learn differently how to see things. So here, I'll give you some samples of them. There are 28 verses in this, and I'll just give you a few. Verse number 10, whenever I see any limited beings, let me expand my discernment of them as my father, my mother, my child or grandchild. So let me rid myself of misleading friends and entrust myself to spiritual friends. Let me not be fawning nor fickle in friendships, but rather always stay faithful. Let me rid myself of insulting others and keep a respectful manner. Then when imparting guideline instructions to others, let me have compassion and a mind wishing to help. And then there was one more that I felt very called to. If I happen to see others, let me speak calmly, gently, and sincerely. Rid myself of any frowns or closed-off expressions and always keep a smile. And when I am continually seeing others, let me not be miserly but take joy in giving and rid myself of all envy. So we have heard similar things on so many of the teachings. And then when they get unpacked, then you see each one of these lines is profound. The one that Venerable's teaching us right now is one of the great thought trainings that Atisha gave to his 3 main disciples. So I want to really just say once again, may all of us continue to create the causative conditions to be able to meet the thought training teachings in the future, the Lam Rim, to be able to have qualified spiritual mentors who have actualized these in their mind. And to really thank the great Kadampa masters for living, actualizing, and then out of compassion, sharing these teachings with the Tibetan people, and then out of our great fortune, being able to meet them as well.